Hey everyone, welcome to part two of the How Hobbies Help interview series. Last time we discussed a little bit about Marco Rudy's origin story, how he came from Mozambique to Canada, and how he utilized comics to help him through the rough times. Today we get to continue our conversation with Marco on what inspired him to write RDW and some advice we would give to our younger selves. Take a listen. What I wanted to address too was how the you mentioned how the book affected me. I was so damn amazed at how little words there were, but how much time. Because at the beginning, there is a little disclaimer. It's meant to keep you on each page, to keep looking for something more. And there's moments of, like you were talking about the addiction, and that's just a page of just no words. You see just the experience, you know, and she's crying out for the people that she lost, and that that you don't need words for that. It was absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
Um, which brings me to my next point. Why do you think mental health is so important to address in this sort of format? I know this is not a question I sent you ahead of time, and I apologize. But
No problem.
since we talked about so many different of your different inspirations, you talked about the comics, you talked about the
Game.
the game, the Witcher game, you talked about the movies,
Yeah.
right? And I want to know, since you caught on to those aspects in all of those formats, why do you feel like it's so important to push the concept of mental health in media?
It's been for a very long time like taboo. Uh, as I just said at the beginning that I was a problem child and people normally would just leave it at that. Um, I find that more and more recently there is more and more people in institutions, and there's a bigger effort to portray or convey that these things happen and they are common. People dealing with a myriad of mental health issues, they are not crazy because that is just it. It's crazy, and
Mm.
it's not that people can lead the most normal lives, smile in your face, and have the most normal days in front of you when they're dealing with a storm inside. And
The happiest people are suffering, the
yeah,
happiest people
yeah,
on the outside. You think
yeah,
of so many celebrities that are like that, like
yeah.
freaking Robin Williams is the first person that jumps to mind.
And Williams, like even what's the name of the music? The guy from Linkin Park,
Yep,
Chester
yep,
Bennington.
yep.
That everybody around him was like, "Oh, he's super nice. He's
An
such a
amazing
positive vibe."
person.
So I feel like I like the
Why do you
idea
think that
that.
is?
Sorry.
Why I'm sorry, that just kind of completely came out of nowhere. Why do you
Hmm.
think that is? For Why do you think that the people who smile the most on the outside suffer the most on the inside?
Oh,
Why
uh,
is why is masking so common?
because I mean, we are encouraged by society standards to be positive, to be successful, to show that you're thriving. It doesn't matter how many rocks life throws at you, but you're still smiling. All those sayings, or people in your family, they're like, you know what? I have beaten all of my odds and I'm here still standing. All of that. So you are. by default, by society standards, encouraged to just to thrive, or at least to show that you're having a good time. So your defense mechanism, I'm speaking from personal experience. My defense mechanism
Please.
was always that, like, I was the clown in the house. I was, and it was a mixture of being the clown in the house and being a recluse.
Mm.
So like always introverted, but at home, even as much as I was introverted, I was the one cracking jokes. I was always the one teasing everybody. I was always
Hmm.
laughing, and then I was the one crying in the closet. So
I feel
um
that so
yeah.
much. I was that
So
kid too. I was the jokester. That,
that's the thing. I don't. It's a reflex. It's a
yeah.
reflex of. Uh, I don't even know if you see you're telling yourself that I can do this. Like I'm fine. Everything is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just the world needs to. I don't know. Not you. You need to show to the world that you're not beaten. I don't. I really don't have a proper answer for it. It is
I
just a
know.
knee-jerk reaction of I need to be okay. So the world needs to see that I'm fine. Like I'm fine. I'm normal. Everything's okay. And then when the world is not looking, you're like, no, it's not. It's
Right.
awful.
When
So
I want to address the moments you were saying you would be the jokester on your front stage, but I want to talk
yeah.
about the backstage, right? I want to talk about as a kid, you're going through all this shit, you're moving a bunch of times, you're getting hassled by other kids because
Mhm.
of supposedly not belonging to any social group,
That was just
right?
one of them. There's quite a bit of
Right.
other stuff, but yeah,
That was right. That's a very small portion, but
yeah,
how did, at the times where it felt like it was completely overwhelming,
yeah.
what did you do? And how did you work out of the tears and into the comic book creator that you are?
I went into another world. I went into Narnia. Like I joke about going into the closet, but I literally did that. My life. I don't even know that I've escaped that because my life away from life was to go read books. I was also not allowed to play video games, so like playing video games. I started playing like outside of going to my friend's house when I went to college. So when I was like 19, 20. But before that, it was reading. I would read and I would draw, and that would be cathartic. Like whatever it is that I was going through, everything was fine when I was in my world with my friends, with my characters, and there are like I mentioned, for instance, the Witcher series of books that I've read so many times that I just the thought of going back to reading them, like, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends again. It
Right.
would be that. It would be like the never-ending story, the movie and the book was my favorite movie. Probably it is my favorite movie of all time, I suppose. And that informed my desire to read more books, to be in other worlds, the way that the library guide describes. Like I was Captain Nemo fighting the Kraken. I was Atreyu saving the like. I wanted because that was better.
Right.
And actually, at that time, I read a series of books from a Brazilian writer that was essentially they were about my life because it was about this kid that he really did not have a fun time growing up in his family with his friends, got bullied a lot, got beaten up a lot, and he created a friendship with a tree, and he would go hang out with his tree friend and talk to the tree friend and whatnot.
Right.
And of course, I had a plethora of imaginary friends, and that would be my tree. So I would go to read those. Like it starts with the tree, and then eventually he meets a frog that in the story the frog eats his art and replaces puts himself in his art stead, and the like it's hard to describe. It was very, for me, it was very important to be a part of those stories, be in those worlds, because I was seeing people trying and succeeding in finding escape, escapism.
Right.
So for me, my only solution to whichever problem that I had when I was growing up, honestly, still today, was to escape, to be in another world. And by being in another world nowadays, I essentially use that to distance myself from what it is that I'm going through, and then analyze things with a different point of view. When I was a kid, I would just want to go away. I was just leave me. I just want to go away. I want to fly. Doesn't really matter. And it was great. It was so great that it became eventually became my work, my life. I still love doing what I do, specifically because I I can nowadays enable other people to escape with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Instead of being, I feel like the important thing is to not let yourself get trapped in that sense of overwhelming feeling, you know. And I feel like that's a key point in why I try to have these conversations. It's because hitting rock bottom hurts, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it is hard to climb back up. You know, when you're the kid who's gotten beaten up because of what you look like and who you are,
yeah,
when you're the adult who's lost too many friends, when you're the woman or man who, or regardless of identity, I don't want to limit it to identity, who's
yeah,
gotten violated in any sort of way,
yeah,
that shit haunts you every day.
yeah.
And a rock bottom seems like more of a normal place than topside, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. The top side is utopic almost.
right. That's your sense, that's your balance. That's your true self, I would say,
Yeah,
is topside. But when you're so used to this realm of crisis, you know, how you said you escape into these worlds and you interact with these characters as if they're your friends. Did
yeah.
they act as a sort of means for you to work through what you are working through? Like
Yeah.
kind of like invisible counselors, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right
Exactly.
term I want to go for, but
No, no, it's
your
exactly.
bouncing board for your
Yeah,
feelings.
yeah, exactly that. Like, um, yeah, that is exactly what happened, and eventually I started telling stories. Even as a kid, I was creating my little stories, and it would be overly simplistic stuff. It's all superheroes and whatnot. And honestly, I think over the past, like, I don't know, 20, 30 years, they became more nuanced. But before, it was pretty simplistic. Bad guy beat good guy beat bad guy at the end.
Right.
And it was great. It was great because you are a scrawny kid, and you had a bad day, and things happened to you when whatever, at school or something. And then you go back home, and you were Spider-Man. And he was also a
Right.
scrawny kid. He would also got bullied, but he
He was a
had super
freaking
strength.
nerd too, you know? He knew he was so smart.
Yeah,
And, you know, and I'm sorry, I love how they represent so many of these comics are representing the underdog. And
yeah.
I also, on the flip side, really appreciate how we're shifting in a direction of being truthful to the villain, who
Oh
the
yeah, also.
villain. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
I put that
yeah,
in
yeah,
quotations because, like I was talking about earlier, the concept of rock bottom. It takes a person, like, it takes a person taking a different step, one single different step to end up a
Yeah.
villain than
Yeah.
to be a hero. And
Yeah.
also, you turn into an anti-hero too when you know, try to be this good version of yourself and fail. And you see a
Yeah.
lot of these characters representing like the Punisher and,
Yeah.
who have gotten nothing but shit and turned to some pretty hardcore stuff to try to stay balanced and grounded.
One
And
of the things that I made a point to do was the characters, like the protagonists. Yeah, even as I add them throughout the story, with the exception of a child that appeared, that eventually comes to, especially in book two, none of them are good people, but
right,
for a specific reason, and all of them have their tiny little things that happen in their life that could have gone one way or the other. And they
right,
decided to not do A, B, or C, or they had to do A, B, or C that inform who they are at the present when we meet them. But none of them, especially the my main protagonist, she is a contract, like a contractor, a mercenary, and
mercenary,
known, renowned mercenary for doing bad things.
yeah. Right,
And eventually we get to know more of her throughout the story, but one of the things is that she's dealing with inner demons for things that may or that happen because of her,
mm-hmm.
and that's maybe kind of like the pathway towards a better
And
future.
how that aligns with her addiction
Yeah,
too is very
exactly.
powerful.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the direction that you took with this book. Um, I feel like representation is one of the first steps
Yeah.
that we need to take as a society to address the concept of mental health, not just limited to trauma, but every realm of mental health, because it affects our physical side too. It affects all aspects of our lives. When we're in pain, our mind suffers. When our mind suffers, our body suffers,
Yeah.
and those around us suffer.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who might have been like a more modern version of your child self right now? Like, what would you tell that kid who's getting bullied, or even your young adult self just getting into the industry and struggling with the family, disagreeing with, your choices in life? What would you tell that person?
um it's interesting that way back when I read a book by a writer called Richard Bach, I think is his name. And one of the books that he wrote is about him as a 50-year-old meeting himself as a 10-year-old or something like that, and giving them advice, discussing their life. And it's a very interesting, because the whole book is this relationship between the two, the younger the kid and the more adult, and how it starts from the adult coming with the perception of, I have lived 50 years of life, so I know things, so you should listen to me, to over time the adult learning more and more from the kid, get
Mm-hmm.
more and more open to things because the kid is, and why don't you see this way, why don't you behave in such and such a fashion. It's a great book. And so uh, I used to say that, like, if I met my younger self, I would say, like, it's okay, like you're doing well. It gets better, which is it's the type of thing that you don't want to hear during those times. It's gonna be okay. Oh, this is in passing.
It feels a little
You,
condescending when you're going through it.
exactly, all those things, you're gonna get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
You're on the receiving end, you're like, what nerve,
Yeah,
man? Like,
yeah.
shut your mouth. Like, just let
That's the
me
thing. That's the thing.
be
Like,
miserable.
I would probably say something like, you know what, you're doing well. Like it's fine. You're okay. It's the person that I met, that I am today, the places that I visited, and the life that I have today, it is so fundamentally alien to the child that I was, that is impossible to, like, even the way I look is so fundamentally opposed to the idea of how I would be when I was a kid that
What did you see yourself as when you were a
oh my
kid?
God.
Like,
I was I was going to be an adult at 25. That was the first thing. I
mm-hmm.
was going to be an adult. I graduated. I would have a respectable job as an architect.
Okay.
Uh, I was going to be a proper person, and not none of this tattoos, all that stuff, none of that. And it turns out that over time you get to know yourself,
Yeah.
and when you get the opportunity to not only get to know yourself and be comfortable with yourself, that you can show who you are to the rest of the world, that is a major victory. It's and by saying that, I'm not saying that I've got like all the way. I probably
Oh
got like
no, it's an
40 to 50%
ongoing
or
thing. Yeah.
30%, and that is enough. That is enough that I can say and do and dress, say and do things and dress the way that I do, be, and feel comfortable with it. As a kid, I would not be as the person that I was essentially built up to be, programmed to be. I would not be comfortable with how I look like nowadays. In any case, I would probably just say that, you know what, like I would give myself a hug.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I
I
like.
think that's the most important thing. I
Yeah, yeah.
think,
I
yeah.
would give myself the longest hug. Like, okay, whatever you want to do, cry, whatever. Let's go. I'm here. I'm here with you, not letting go.
Right.
Not gonna go anywhere. Because I feel like the child that I was just wanted that.
Right.
For the longest period, I just wanted that. Like, I'm here, not going anywhere. The the friend I had a incredibly limited pool of friends. It was two friends, and
Mhm.
one of them was my escape friend. We played together. Well, recently, actually, went back to Mozambique just a few days ago, and I gave him my book.
Oh
And I told
my
him, like, if
God.
if you weren't if you weren't giving me video games and comic books to read, this would not have happened. So this
Oh, that
is
is
this
amazing.
is because all the times that I skipped class to come play video games at your house or read comics, like all of that
It
is
was worth it.
this is because of that.
Yes.
So
Oh my God. I bet
that
that
was
felt so good.
oh
I
yeah, that was on this side, and on the other side it was a completely different experience, that a completely different friendship that I had with an older lady, and she was the hug.
Oh
like,
yeah.
like she appeared in my life when I was like 16, 17 or something, and we became good friends. The irony, no, the advent of internet, because of ICQ.
Hmm.
First ICQ, and then eventually we met in person. We were friends and whatnot. But stop doing that, friend. My cat likes cables, and he's being a little bit of a nuisance now.
It's
But
totally fine.
she was that presence, the older presence that was there. Like, you want to vent, you want to cry,
Right.
I will give you a hug, I will give you all the support. So I
I
would
have a
have
friend that
essentially just
calls
be
that
that.
downloading.
Sorry?
I have a friend that calls that downloading.
Yep.
That you download so it's not energy you're carrying around with you.
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
you're
So
putting it
rather
on a
than
flash
say it,
drive
yeah.
instead of, suffering from it. And I think that's pretty great.
So rather than say a lot of stuff to my younger self, I would just say, I'm here. Whatever you need, I'm here.
Right.
What you want. If you want a hug, I'll give you a hug. I'm just here.
Right.
So be yourself.
I'll ask this question in another way as well. What about your advice for the kids crying in a closet, drawing out their feelings and wanting to take the same path that you took? What would you say to them as far as, you know, career
It,
advice is concerned?
it's a bit of it's a tricky situation because I would want that to not happen. I would want this kid to be a happy kid, to have the most normal
I feel
relationship they
you.
have with everybody, to have loads of friends, to interact with everybody, express themselves as much as they can. But the truth of the matter is that it didn't happen. And because it didn't happen, or at least in some way, because it happened, I'm here today. I hate
Right.
the when people say that, you know what, I've gone through tough times and I'm here today and I'm fine. I'm not fine. It didn't
No.
not at all. But over time, at 40, I have learned that I've had issues over the years, that I can address this and this and that way, and I can use these things to tell stories. It wasn't that way at 30, definitely not
Right.
at 20. So the worst for me is, like, I would say, like, keep at it, because you're
Right.
gonna find an excellent way to vocalize these things. But I wouldn't want that. I would want this kid to have the most normal, the happiest, to be the happiest they can be. And I don't
Right.
know that that would then engender the path that I've led eventually. But even if it didn't, they would be happy. They'd be
Right.
happier.
Right.
So I would I that I'm of two minds. I would almost say both would work. To, you know what, I'm sorry, dude, endure this, and you're gonna turn out that you're gonna be in some way helping other people by the stories that you tell. Or, you know what, let's find other ways to address what you're going through right now that may or may not end in the future. That is me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, it's all the concept of just finding your comfortable journey, right?
Yep.
The way, and I feel like this is most crucial, to be the most you,
Yep.
right? um we're trying so hard to play face and be this version of ourselves that we aren't when we go home at the end of the day.
Yep.
We're trying to fit into our job, our social obligations, find our way in this political hellish landscape that exists today, navigating everything that's going on. So I totally lost my point. I hate that. It happens every interview at least once.
Okay.
My brain shuts down in the middle of my question. Please hold as my brain reboots. Um, we're navigating our journey, right? And you navigated it by channeling it into art, which is something that I got the pleasure of discussing in our first YouTube video that we've been able to put out with Zambies, on the concept of, and you kind of brought it up earlier too, of being you, right? And finding your identity and, amongst this mental health journey. I don't know if I'm making sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
When you felt completely okay with, I'm just gonna wear my hair like this and
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw on a sweatshirt because that's fucking comfortable and that's how I'm gonna be able to have a best discussion, you know? So the process of channeling that out, the process of creating your art, when does that happen? When on those days when everything is overwhelming. I want to go back to specific processes, right? Um, you identified that you were feeling low, right? Um, in whatever manner that you did. But what does it look like from there? Do you automatically pick up the pencil, or do you
Mhm.
meditate on it for a minute, or do you reflect on those emotions with somebody or with
Is
those
this,
characters that you were
is
talking
this
through?
before or nowadays or both?
I would say both. As a
Okay.
kid and then now,
Yeah.
how did that process evolve for you?
So as a kid, it was completely unconscious. It was something that I would do mechanically. I was not having a good time. I would go read a book, read a story, cry myself out as I'm doing that, and I would find myself drawing. Just at some point, during that moment, I had been drawing, and I'd keep drawing, and things
What
would
was your
just
go-to thing to draw as a kid? For me, it was
for
eyes and I drew eyeballs a lot. I drew a lot of stick figures with
stick figures. I would
hair.
stick figure stories
Yeah.
panel,
Hmm.
or I would draw whatever. So if I was reading like a comic book, which was, I would say that after like reading novels, well, it was the imaginary working. So when I was reading comic books, because it was so visual, at some point I would find a drawing that I would emulate. Like I'm
Right.
just reading
Okay.
something like, oh, I like that. So I would even stop reading and start emulating, and then I'm drawing, and that would be that. So in fact, that's essentially how I learned how to draw. I'll draw like better, I suppose, just trying to emulate other artists. And eventually I got to
For
where I'm
sure.
at right now. And nowadays, it's it's interesting because I have mentioned this to my girlfriend that if I am angry at something or frustrated, specifically frustrated at something, I'm very effective when I want to tell a story. If I have to do like a commission or do a cover, it's doing commission work. Even like if I'm working in interior artwork, it is mechanical in that I have a direction. I find myself the creative side that I need to create whatever image that I have to create for the story that I need to tell. And once that's nailed, I don't have to think about it. I'm painting it as something that comes naturally. Whereas when I'm writing, working on my book, it is everything is dedicated to it. I am fully, completely focused on it. And if I'm frustrated, I am very effective.
I
Uh,
don't think that is uncommon. I feel
Yeah,
like that
I
is a
am
very common
incredibly
thing.
effective at zeroing and bearing in mind that I can be the stories are the characters are I'm created in a situation where they interact and whatnot. The situation is this, but in my mind, I'm also thinking, why didn't this person say? Why would this person say this? Why would they behave
Right.
like that?
Right.
Or why are people unaware that the world is going to explode at some point and people are not doing anything about it? So I'm equally thinking of that as I'm like, yeah. But then A says this to B, and they have to this be this camera angle, so the layout has to be this way. So I'm very like I'm not distracted when
Right.
I'm like frustrated. When I am in a good mood, I'm like, oh yeah, this is good, but I can be a little more distracted. distracted.
Oh
I can
yeah.
I can stop a few minutes, like look up like YouTube or something. Also, when I am creative, especially when I'm working on my book, I have a music set list that is always the same, that I always play in the same order, and
Interesting.
many times I loop the same song for an hour.
I was just
uh,
talking about this concept
yeah,
with my friend
yeah,
yesterday because I had to download. No, it was today. It was literally
yeah.
today. My goodness. I had to download because I've been overwhelmed, right? And he's like, "When's the last time that you got emotionally connected with music? When's the last time you turned on an album and you sat there and you cried?"
Mm,
You know, when is the last time you looped a song over and over and over for the purpose, um, not for the purpose of practicing, but for the purpose of soul searching, right?
yeah, it's a set of songs. It's a set of it's not even an album, not even a set list. But I know there are times where you're like, there's this cloud of the depression cloud is above,
Right.
and it's gonna come. Like you're like, yeah, I know, I'm feeling okay, everything is fine, but something is wrong, and it's gonna hit at some point. And I'm not even joking. There'll be times where, you know what, I'm gonna put that one song, and it's gonna hit, and we're gonna write it up, and we're gonna listen to the song again, and this is gonna be okay, and this is gonna be our time to just let it, everything that's pent up needs to be released right now. We do the releasing, and then we go about our way. And that's that. Like, I know which song to go, I know which sequence of music to go. Let's just put it this way. My girlfriend really likes Radiohead. I
Okay.
like Radiohead, but I think Radiohead is incredibly sad, so I don't listen to it until I do.
Right.
Yeah,
I get you.
yeah,
I've been listening to a lot of sad stuff for that very same reason, because you just need to get it out, you know?
yeah,
Because when
yeah.
you listen to the sad song, you not only realize that you're not alone, or that you're, you know, the most important point being that you're not alone,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and that you have a connection to this music that's allowing you to ground yourself,
yeah.
right? Um, so I feel like it's very important to listen to angry, sad, music.
Yeah.
Now think about what happens physiologically as you listen to the music, right? It shows, there's science that shows, and I couldn't even specify for you. I'll have to look it up. But
Mhm.
there is science that suggests that music can even affect your pulse. So
Mm,
intense music can increase your pulse, and slower music can decrease your pulse, right?
yeah.
So what the effectiveness of listening to something sad or something triggersome that might raise your pulse a little bit. Do you think that was effective for you trying to navigate the hard stuff?
Yeah, yeah. It's always helped. Yeah, definitely. Before I didn't have like go to music that I was like, okay, I'm feeling this coming, and I'm gonna go listen to that. I didn't have that. I knew when I was very, very young, there was a set of music that for no reason I would listen to it and I'd cry. The
Mm-hmm.
Phil Collins album that I would listen to and I would cry. And it like it took a while to get why that was the point. It it was very unconscious, but it was something that I was very consciously unconscious. Like, the reason why you listen to this album is because it says this, this, and that, and this is how
Right.
you're affected. But I was 10, 11. I didn't even know if I was. I didn't even know enough English at the time, I would say, to pay attention to it until I did. So Um, as I said before, nowadays it's something that if I feel coming, I procure it so we can have this conversation and let it go. But for the most part, I don't go there if I don't have to. It's more if I'm being creative, I have a very specific set list that I listen to, or at least that I have to start listening to, and then it plays in the background and plays in my mind to get me going, essentially.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me this evening. I want to end just talking a little bit more about how freaking amazing and powerful your book is.
Thank you.
Um, I remember when we first picked it up, it was my husband actually that picked it up. And he was the one who was like, "Hey, you really need to read this book because it's right up your alley." So we get back to the hotel room that evening and we sit down and I read it first because he's completely caught my attention by the description of the book. And I'm flipping through it and like I said, slowly, as it says at the beginning of the book, and you catch something more each time you read it. I read it again just before we started having our discussion, and the image that lasted with me this time that I don't think I noticed as much was the image of the things crawling into the eyeball. You know, like you have the hands and the people going into it. Oh, it's hard to describe for me to
Yeah.
describe, but it's a part of the journey that they're going through and the encounters that they come across in this book that I don't want to spoil. Please
Yeah.
read it. You need to read it if you are a mental health advocate at all, if you are someone navigating your journey, because at the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff that we need to break this taboo, right? How many of us were taught that mental health was taboo? And
Yeah.
here we are reading it and having access to material that puts it right out there. Like it's okay to address addiction, you know, it doesn't make you weak to check yourself into rehab. It makes you strong for identifying that you had an issue, right? It's, I can't say enough about how wonderful. It's not very long, but it is very powerful. And so please read it.
It
Um,
has a replay value, as
yes,
in
it
a reread
does.
value. Yeah.
Yes, it does. And it makes me more and more eager for what's to come too, because you get pulled in because you kind of figure out at the beginning how she's not really a great person,
Yep.
and the people that you encounter throughout the story aren't great people either.
Yep.
But it gets to a point like, when do you become a good person? You know, you take the steps to, you might, like in this case, she went out of her way to help somebody she didn't know.
Yep.
But, you know, it's a whole journey of getting to the point where you identify having an issue, let alone navigating the journey of after that,
Yeah.
of self-discovery, of healing, right? And sometimes it's a lifetime journey, the triggers, they're everlasting. They're, you might have generally feel that you are okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We try to fit that mold because society needs us to be okay to fulfill certain roles. I swear I can speak. Um, so in addition to your book and spreading its message the way it does, what is one more message that you would like to share with your audience with regards to navigating their mental health journey?
it's I guess the first step is the hard, like, again, it's like almost like a adage. The first step is the hardest and whatnot, but it is true to be aware that whatever people say that you have a problem, it's not that it's not. Let's not call it a problem. Let's not
Thank
identify it as
you.
such, because it becomes diminishing from the get-go. You're
Mhm.
addressing yourself as a problem from the get-go, when at the end of the day you're a result of circumstance. And yes, there might be chemistry in your brain that is really hampering your day-to-day life, and it is important to acknowledge yourself as capable of doing things normal. I put it in quotations because everything is normal at the end of the day. Just society decides that what's today's fashion tomorrow isn't, and the other way around.
It's
So
interesting how you bring that up.
yeah, so at the end of the day, it's just try. It is very hard to accept yourself from the get-go, or to forgive yourself, or to cede space to yourself to know even more, to be more curious about what it is that is happening to you and how it is that you can address it. I am no way a professional. I know the things that I deal and I have dealt with in my life, which, to be honest, a lot of people have dealt with much harder.
Don't
But
belittle yourself.
no, I don't. I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that uh, mine is a very limited experience and a very limited view of things. But in that limitation, I am privileged enough to have talked to people that have helped, to have talked to myself at points, to encourage myself that some bad decisions may have not been so bad, some good decisions may have not have been so good, and navigating that, like accepting mistakes and working your life through it in a way that you can just exist. Because
Exist.
another thing is the lure of non-existence is quite powerful, and especially in the days that we're currently living nowadays. So to resist that lure is hard. So I would try to encourage people to just cede space to themselves to be able to navigate these things in just a more understanding way towards themselves.
And
Essentially, that
compassionate, yeah.
compassionate. Exactly. Yeah.
It's we're and I've been chastised for this. I don't know how many times. I'm sure you have too, for being so hard on yourself.
Oh yeah.
We are so prone to being so hard on ourselves, and having a hard time is viewed as weakness as opposed to a strength because you're
Yeah.
overcoming it, not succumbing to it, right? So, Marco, you've been a gem. You've done art for Marvel and DC,
Yeah.
and you've created a powerful piece outside of that. And I want to emphasize how incredible it is to have had the conversations with you that we have had, not just here, but at Fan Expo. And I sure hope that this is not the last conversation.
Me too.
Because, uh, you know, even if you've not been personally affected by trauma in the way that you've portrayed it here, does the influence that you've drawn from to create this story was enough to trigger the self analysis. right? Because you break down these instances of like substance abuse into very vivid but separated, like you break it out in traditional comic book style,
Mm.
but each panel is but a second in the span of time for a person in crisis, right? For me, when I've had a panic attack, it felt very much like that. For
Yeah.
me, when I was going through my lows of dealing with drinking too much, it felt like that. And I know I am not the only one who experienced life in such a way where we've had to change course
Yeah.
because there was a lot of pain, and self analysis was crucial, right? And it's hard for a lot of people, a lot of my peers, warriors, to come to that realization, right?
Yeah.
It's hard for people who were taught that sadness or showing emotion was a weakness. It's hard for people who are told that victims need to stay silent because it disrupts the course of, you know, everyday
Status quo.
reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, this is the challenge we need. You know, Stories like this, reflections on ourselves and those around us in a way where it is okay to speak and it is okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Because when we don't let ourselves not be okay, it ends up being a whole lot worse.
Exactly.
So thank you again. Um, I'm going to put all the links down below, so please go check that out. Links to the book where you can acquire RDW,
Hmm.
please, at very least, go check that out.
Thank you.
Because, like I said, it's powerful, it's moving, and it's a must see if you are in the comic book world at all as a fan, as a creator. It's a true work of art, I feel like. So thanks again. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, if you liked this video and you want to see more, hit that like button and also the subscribe button so that you'll get those alerts for future videos.